Welcome. The point of this is more or less just to explore whatever's going on in my mind. I was listening to Michael Parkinson interviewing Dr. Jacob Bronowski in 1974, 52 years ago. And Bronowski wrote a series and acted in it, well, presented it, called The Ascent of Man. It was sort of associated with another series that was coming out of Britain at the time called Civilization with Kenneth Clark. And I've watched both of these series at different times in my life. I really immersed myself in The Ascent of Man. And, he goes back into the idea that we evolved from rebels of our species who didn't do what our ancestors did. And we, innovated to survive, to adapt to our society and our environment. And we have a situation now where we are really making a hell of a dent in our environment. As I look around my own environment, and you can see a little bit of it behind me, you can see I've created a good bit of the tools of civilization. I see behind me, right, like there, the Andy Warhol Diaries. Next to that is another book, but I don't know what it is. I'll turn around. Oh, yeah, it's also a Warhol. It's a novel he wrote, and I've got an Italian translation of that. One thing leads to another in my mind, so I know exactly where I got that yellow ish book there. It was in Milan. I was there for an interview for a job that had been created with me in mind. That was very nice. My friend Jennifer Carey, who last checked was back in Italy. My friend Odette, who was a guest on Harrowings podcast a bit ago, let me know that she thought Jennifer was back in Italy after being in San Francisco for a while. And she's still running a business with her husband, a consulting business that helps people transform their lives. And we're all about alchemy. We're all about transforming from darkness to light, from dawn to dusk and back again. The gold of existence, it's like hitting the lottery, just being born, because it's really unusual that eukaryotic life persists, and it's been doing it one after another, one act of conception after another. When I was conceived, it was probably May-ish, roughly, of and the lovely month of May, after all. A young man's heart turns to romance. My mother and father got together, and I ended up arriving here February 4th, 1963. So it was May 1962. And I think in terms of history, because what was happening in May 1962 in the world? Well, you're running right up to the Cuban Missile Crisis of October. And I'm in utero then. The East Coast was scared. I expect that fear got sort of transmitted into the body that was forming in my mother's womb. And when I emerged, I was emerging into a world where things didn't feel exactly safe. And, just a few months later, you had the Kennedy assassination, and one thing led to another. And what you have evolving, of course, can be seen easily on like the Netflix series Turning Point, the Vietnam War. I highly recommend people watch that. Now, you have to be realizing that anything that's actually produced and published to the world is suspect. It has an axe to grind. It has a particular lens it's looking at things through. So we should all do our primary research. My own research goes back into my memory of watching the 6 o'clock evening news back in the 60s. We saw all of the different things that were being presented to us on that news broadcast with Walter Cronkite signing off saying, and that's the way it is. And I trusted that man. I think he was known as the most trusted man in America. Walter Cronkite. Yeah. He was a good friend of Carlisle Hummelstein, who was at one time an assistant secretary of state and later became the president of the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. And to me, was the top of Colonial Williamsburg, which was what was providing sustenance for my family. My father was a historian from 1961 on. December of that year, he took a position as a research assistant, swiftly promoted to a research associate, eventually given the title historian as he was passed over to be the director of that organization, the research department in Colonial Williamsburg, and they brought in somebody from outside. Um, that was a bit of a clash. So my father moved on to being the director of the Georgia Historical Society briefly, but Williamsburg couldn't do without him, it seems. And there were lots of reasons, I think, for this. But my father came back to Williamsburg after a period of 9 months down in Georgia. He, in that time, tripled the endowment of the Georgia Historical Society and was quite successful. I think it was something that he regretted having to do, but my mother was not keen on leaving her job as the registrar at the Department of Collections, which she had held since 1972, and this was in the 80s. So she continued there for 32 years as the registrar, retiring in 2004. My father continued editing the Colonial Williamsburg Journal as a consultant for a period of number of years after he stepped down from his role in day-to-day affairs. And I think he was very happy in his career. I run the Harold B. Gill Foundation here. We try to protect and preserve the legacy of my late father. And I think I'm doing a fairly decent job of that. I've been doing things when I get on here live when I don't have a guest, of like reading sections of his works. This one being The Gunsmith in Colonial Virginia. And it's kind of mirrored. I wonder if there's a setting where I could make it like read the things as they appear. This one has a list of gunsmiths' accounts, biographies of gunsmiths, what's known about them, and lots of illustrations of the types of mechanisms that were being forged out. I was learning to forge these things myself when I was a youngster, about 30 years old or so. I transferred over to the gunsmith shop briefly, and then I went to conservation and worked behind the scenes. Conservation was a great career, I think, and I blew that away to go back to school to learn German better, get my master's degree in that at the University of Pittsburgh, and then moved to Denmark after a stint in the Carnegie Museum of Art's conservation department. So I've had a lot of different experiences that are all piled together in my head. And I think in terms of materials and how things are influence one another, how things degrade, the just long-term effects of our actions or inactions, and how that all shapes the world we're in. I'm a little aghast at what my species has done to this planet. But I don't know. I don't know if I'm a suitable judge, but I do think we could do better. And I think we would do better if we were more mindful, more aware, more awake to the fact that we are all one. We are iterations of a pattern, and we are doing things together. We are co-creating the world we live in. So I quite often talk about how every cent spent is a vote for the kind of world we are co-creating. I can recommend again that people watch A Scent of Man. I am working on a text right now, and I don't know if this will shut down my picture or not when I go flick it open, but I'll try to just draw this thing. Whoop, it's not letting me do that. Wonder why not. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So let's go back on screen here where I can see me and look at you. And I'll read you a little bit about what I'm writing. I have, of course, the ability for these things to be read. And it jumps around a bit. I might actually edit it with you as I'm writing. There are a lot of videos interspersed into it, which would break up somebody's experience of it. But, I think it's like nonlinear, all of these texts I write. And I'm actually going to read out the lyrics because I'm not going to sing this one, but there's a song in there too, the lyrics of the song. So this one is called Harrowings of Living Life in the First Century of the Third Millennium is the subtitle. Got an image of Eris, as usual, the goddess of chaos, who I consider to be my anima, surveying the monitors in the bunker on a chilly March morning. That would be like this morning. It's not terribly cold, in the 40s, cloudy out there. I didn't go out yesterday, probably won't go out today. But I will read you this. Harrowing times require us to attempt to articulate our terror. What can it be but terrifying that we are mortal? We may well have entertained ourselves to death, I feel. It is frightening to be here now, yet here we are, here now. We have an opportunity. It is the one life we get in this setting. Just 100 years ago, we were just beginning to get a sense of how vast creation actually is. I don't think we know just now even what an unusual occurrence we are. I zoom out to look on our planet from about a quarter of the way to the moon and think of what a beautiful instance of life in the vastness of the cosmos we have here. Do we appreciate it? I feel we do not. I feel we are all so myopic. I might be wrong about this feeling. I hope I am. At this moment, I am listening to a ritual, Nous sommes du soleil. That's from Tales of Topographic Oceans. And Nous sommes du soleil is We Are the Sun. And I'm not going to read you the whole lyrics. But as I scroll down through it, I can hear it in my head. And then I go into a little research I did. Here's how this and the other three sides of Tales from Topographic Oceans came about. It was a 2-volume thing with 4 compositions in it. So Jamie Muir, who was the innovative percussionist best known for his brief but impactful stint with King Crimson, contributing to their 1973 album Larks, Tongues, and Aspic, experienced a profound transformation after reading Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but the book, a spiritual classic detailing Yogananda's life, encounters with gurus and teachings on Kriya Yoga and meditation triggered an intense emotional and spiritual reaction in Muir. By the way, he just passed away very recently, Jamie Muir. This awakening played a key role in his decision to abruptly leave King Crimson shortly after Larks, Tongues, and Aspic's release and recording sessions. He felt compelled to abandon his music career, the London scene, and secular pursuits altogether. In his own words from later interviews, Muir described experiences over several months that led him to conclude he had to give up music despite a full year of tours already planned. He prioritized this inner calling to avoid deep, lifelong regret, even though it meant letting bandmates down. The departure was officially attributed to a, quote, personal injury, unquote, in press statements, but Muir clarified that was not accurate. He simply had to follow his spiritual path. And that takes some guts when you're in a successful band. Immediately after this shift, Muir relocated to Scotland and joined the Samye Ling Monastery, a Tibetan Buddhist center near Escadala-Muir, where he pursued a monastic lifestyle for several years. This marked a complete pivot from avant-garde improvisation and rock performance to dedicated spiritual practice. Interestingly, before heading north to the monastery, Muir attended Bill Bruford's wedding reception in early March 1973. There he had a significant conversation with Yes singer John Anderson, who was curious about what fueled Muir's extraordinary stage presence and energy. Muir recommended and essentially handed him Autobiography of a Yogi, describing it as transformative. Anderson later credited Muir as a messenger who, quote, changed my life, unquote, by introducing him to the book at a pivotal moment. This directly inspired Anderson's deep dive into spiritual themes, leading to Yes's ambitious 1973 double album, Tales from Topographic Oceans, which drew heavily from the book's ideas, including a notable footnote that influenced its conceptual structure. And I have actually footnoted that note about a particular footnote. So I'm going to scroll down to that and read you the footnote on the footnote. The exact text of the footnote. The lengthy footnote on page 83, some earlier editions, page 104 in the 1998 Self-Realization Fellowship edition, reads, quote, pertaining to the Shastras, literally sacred books comprising 4 classes of scripture, the Shruti, Smriti, Purana, and Tantra. These comprehensive treatises cover every aspect of religious and social life and the fields of law, medicine, architecture, art, etc. The Shrutis are the directly heard or revealed scriptures, the Vedas. The Smritis, or remembered lore, are finally written down in the remote past as the world's longest epic poems, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. Puranas, 18 in number, are literally ancient allegories. Tantras literally means rites or rituals, and that's why ritual, nous sommes désolés, is there. So these treatises convey profound truths under a veil of detailed symbolism. It appears in the context of Yogananda discussing monastic discipline or scriptural authority, most often cited from Chapter 10, I Meet My Master, Sri Yuktasvar, or a related section on Lahiri Mahasaya. How it inspired John Anderson in the album is also in my footnote here. Anderson was given the book by King Crimson percussionist Jamie Muir, as we mentioned, at Bill Bruford's wedding reception just weeks earlier. While the band was in Japan, Anderson later recalled in the album's liner notes, leafing through Autobiography of a Yogi, I caught up with a lengthy footnote on page 83. It described the four-part Shastric scriptures, which cover all aspects of religion, social life, as well as fields like medicine, music, art, and architecture. I became engrossed with the idea of a four-part epic concept album. He pitched the four-part structure to guitarist Steve Howe on the tour, which was backing Close to the Edge, and they sketched lyrics and themes in a hotel room. The result was Yes's ambitious double LP, released in December 1973, with each 20-minute side-long track built around one shastra. The first was The Revealing Science of God, parenthetically called The Dance of the Dawn, and that's from Shruti, the directly heard and revealed Vedas. Then there's, quote, The Remembering, parenthetically, High the Memory, quote, that's the Smriti, the remembered lore, exempli gratia, the Mahabharata and Ramayana epics. And then there's the ancient, parenthetically, giants under the sun, Puranas, the 18 ancient allegories / myths. And then finally, ritual, nous sommes désolés, which is the tantras, the rites, the rituals that veil profound truths in symbolism. So the album title, Tales from Topographic Oceans, is Anderson's poetic invention. He later explained in liner notes and interviews that it evokes the ebb and flow and depth of our mind's eye, the vast mapped topographic inner ocean of human consciousness, thoughts, memories, and accumulated knowledge stretching back millions of years. The detailed symbolic oceans of the Shastras become a metaphor for exploring spiritual and mental landscapes. He admitted he had only a basic understanding of the text at the time and drew inspiration from mystic Vera Stanley Alder and Jacob Bronowski's BBC series, The Ascent of Man, which I was talking about earlier. And I'm going to scroll up a little bit. I do have a note here from Fazli Samir that they're 78 plus. I'm 63 plus myself. Used to be a jazz drummer in my youth and adulthood. I can relate a lot to the story. However, I didn't look for an alternate path to follow, but simply decluttered my mind at age 40 and found myself completely free of fear, attachment, and cravings for material pleasures. Well, good for you. The Intrepid Editor Press is joined too. Good morning. We've been reading my latest unpublished work, which is about harrowing, and, how it goes. We were just talking about particularly Tales from Topographic Oceans and this notable footnote from the autobiography of a yogi that influenced it. And he mentions that it's in a man. It was also one of the things that inspired him, and I'm going to read about that now that I've done with the footnote. We lost Jamie recently. I just mentioned that earlier. Jamie Muir, the percussionist for King Crimson during Lark's Tongues and Aspect. He was a wild man on stage, dressed in furs, jumping around on the stage all over the place. Lots of different types of percussion. Quite an influential figure in the history of progressive music, if you want to call it that. Kind of interesting that Robert Fripp disagrees with calling it that. I don't blame him. Ah, there it is. I was looking for this. So to read on, and I will, as I move things around a little bit. Move things around a little bit. I can't have that down there. That's not good. Ugh. Very good. I'm back. So we lost Jamie recently. What our artists have given us, well, it's remarkable. As the footnote indicates, John Anderson was also inspired by Jacob Bronowski, as I have been as well. His Ascent of Man series is one of my most prized possessions. I immersed myself in this during the 1990s. Man is a singular creature, Bronowski intones at the beginning of the first episode. A heart attack took his life not long after the series was aired. I just looked it up. It was, I believe, August 22nd of 1974 that he died of a heart attack in New York. We stand in the shadow of our ancestors. We are the ancestors of all those to come. We must pass on what was freely passed to us. That is part of what Harrowings is attempting to do. If not us, who? Not now, when? We are not guaranteed another second. The first episode of The Ascent of Man features Pink Floyd playing this piece, and I give a link to Pink Floyd's Careful with That Axe, Eugene, being played live at Pompeii in 1972. And that's interesting because it was done in the excavations in the arena in Pompeii, which had been, dug out of the volcanic ash. And that was really striking to me. When I was a kid, I would read up on Pompeii and how they find the casts or make casts of the space where the bodies had been, if they were incinerated within the hot pyroclastic flows. Anyway, I digress. I haven't written about that. So having watched the first episode once again, I'm struck by the erudition of Bronowski. It's what holds my attention. His manner of speaking to his audience as if they are his equal, although a glance at the man's biography will show how far from his peer I am. I cannot speak for anyone else. And then I said, let Sir David Attenborough tell you. And there's a little thing from the BBC, The Ascent of Man, extra interview with Sir David Attenborough. So I throw that in there and people can cut into that and watch it. It's not terribly long, maybe 20 minutes. My takeaway is that my species has lived through harrowing times. We are very fortunate not to have made ourselves extinct. We certainly have the capacity to do so. So long as we have breath in our bodies, we are in a position to interact with the world in which we find ourselves, providing the rest of the biological machinery is operational anyway. And then I put in a clip. This aired just after Bronowski's death, and I've only watched about 2/3 of it so far. I was watching it before 10 o'clock came up, so there we are. The thought takes me back to a post I made a few days ago, and that's zooming in on the scene in which I'm talking about that pneumonia episode that nearly killed me 30 years ago, right about now. I was by then, I think, the hospital ward, generally in my room at Shadyside Hospital, out of the ICU by March 5th. Is it 5th or 6th? It's the 6th, isn't it? Yes, by March 6th. I would be in there for another week or so before I went back to Williamsburg, Virginia, and convalesced for a couple of weeks and returned to University of Pittsburgh to audit my courses, basically, and extend my support there as a teaching assistant for another year, as the pneumonia really did kick a different trajectory for me, and I got to meet other people. We all basically formed a kind of cohesive group, the graduate students did, and many of those relationships are still intact, I believe, in a manner of speaking. Okay, so I talk about the zooming in on the scene, then I say we are here now, and it is a miracle that we are. I keep coming back to that idea. We can love each other for the simple fact of our existence. If we are here, we have overcome the odds and can be the change we want to see in the world. We have an obligation to do so. We have a responsibility to all who come after us to help each other and not harm each other. I could go on, and I often do. However, let's return to Tales from Topographic Oceans, which I did not do. Instead, I have a space for Tales, another link to one of the compositions. Not sure which one I'm going to pick out yet. Maybe I'll pick out all three and plug them in there. But then I jumped to something that crossed my radar from 13 years ago when I was posting my thoughts on Facebook. Memories come back, from Facebook, and here it is. The great German philosopher Schopenhauer, in a magnificent essay, and this is a quotation from Joseph Campbell, by the way, Myths to Live By, 2011 publication from the Joseph Campbell Foundation. Okay. So, quote, the great German philosopher Schopenhauer, in a magnificent essay on, quote, the foundation of morality, treats of this transcendental spiritual experience. How is it, he asks, that an individual can so forget himself and his own safety that he will put himself and his life in jeopardy to save another from death or pain, as though that other's life were his own, that other's danger his own? Such a one is then acting, Schopenhauer answers, out of an instinctive recognition of the truth that he and that other, in fact, are one. He has been moved not from lesser secondary knowledge of himself as separate from others, but from an immediate experience of the greater, truer truth that we are all one in the ground of our being. Schopenhauer's name for this motivation is, quote, compassion, unquote, Mitleid, which is to suffer with. And he identifies it as the one and only inspiration of inherently moral action. It is founded, in his view, in a metaphysically valid insight. For a moment, one is selfless, boundless, without ego. So, that's the excerpt from Joseph Campbell's Myths to Live By, Joseph Campbell Foundation, 2011, 0311, iBooks. Okay. Well, 13 years ago, I posted that, right? The main point being that, quote, we are all one in the ground of our being, unquote. And to be, quote, selfless, boundless, without ego, unquote, seems to me to be a worthy goal. I'm reminded now of the work of Julia Cassara, PhD. It has been my great good fortune to connect to Julia here and learn from her of the concept of henosis. Let's all try to band together in the awareness of our essential unity. Union with the primordial is what I'm after and where I am. Whether this is acknowledged by myself or others, so are you. If you are able to read what I am writing, should I translate this? And then I said, why not? And I translated it into Danish just for shits and giggles. But what came up out of that was, I can't pronounce the Danish well. I don't speak it. I just read it. And it's a pretty good translation. But out of the Danish translation of this paragraph above, I have found that seeking emerges when I talk about it's what I'm after, it's what I'm seeking. Søge is the sort of the Danish word. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. And that reminds me of the fact that seeking is what we are doing as we move from birth to death. We're trying to figure out what the point is. And I was doing a little thing about whether it's the point of life with somebody recently. Now it's not coming back to me exactly who I was talking to when we were talking about what is the point. Oh, it was Dr. Gabriela Kereshi over in Hungary. It'll be back here soon on this side of the pond. Good to see you, Deep Left Analysis. If anybody has any questions or want to contribute like Fazli Samir did, please have at it. I'm game to hear what you think of what I'm saying. So, when I talk about how we're all seeking to birth to death, I brought back to my late father a short biography of Harold B. Gill Jr., 1933 to 2024 is stuck in there. The caption says, Harold Bledsoe Gill Jr., January 16, 1933 to April 7th, 2024, was a prominent American historian specializing in colonial and early post-revolutionary Virginia. Known for his meticulous research and innovative use of technology in historical studies, Gill contributed significantly to the understanding of 18th century American life, particularly through his, and it probably went into his very early computer-assisted statistical analysis of the York County records, a project he embarked on in the 70s and still being used today. So I'm grateful that I was able to put books into my father's hands, which I hope helped him to make sense of his life. One in particular that we both enjoyed was called Thou Art That, and I've got it here. Um, and that is the first book coming out from the Joseph Campbell Foundation, which is also a major inspiration for the Harold B. Gill Foundation, LLC, that I am the executive director of. This one actually came out of a library of Ronald L. Leonard. I see he's signed it on the inside here. The other copy that my father had gave him is also in another room, so I've got a couple of copies of this. I started reading some of this, the introduction to it by Eugene Kennedy, PhD, some time ago, into what was it, a Substack? Probably one of the early ones. But chapter one is Metaphor and Religious Mystery, the Meaning of Myth. Let me begin by explaining the history of my impulse to place metaphor at the center of our exploration of Western spirituality. When the first volume of my historical atlas of the world mythology, The Way of the Animal Powers, came out, the publishers sent me on a publicity tour. This is the worst kind of all possible tours because you move unwillingly to those disc jockeys and newspaper people, themselves unwilling to read the book they are supposed to talk to you about in order to give it public visibility. The first question I would be asked was always, what is a myth? That is a fine beginning for an intelligent conversation. In one city, however, I walked into a broadcasting station for a live half-hour program where the interviewer was a young, smart-looking man who immediately warned me, I'm tough. I put it to you. I've studied law. The red light went on and he began argumentatively, the word myth means a lie. Myth is a lie. So I replied with my definition of myth. No, myth is not a lie. A whole mythology is an organization of symbolic images and narratives, metaphorical of the possibilities of human experience and the fulfillment of a given culture at a given time. It's a lie, he countered. It's a metaphor. It's a lie. This went on for about 20 minutes. Around 4 or 5 minutes before the end of the program, I realized that this interviewer did not really know what a metaphor was. I decided to treat him as he was treating me. No, I said, I tell you it's metaphorical. You give me an example of a metaphor. He replied, you give me an example. I resisted. No, I'm asking the question this time. I had not taught school for 30 years for nothing. I want you to give me an example of a metaphor. The interviewer was utterly baffled and even went so far as to say, let's get in touch with some school teacher. Finally, with something like a minute and a half to go, he rose to the occasion and said, I'll try. My friend John runs very fast. Some people say he runs like a deer. That's a metaphor. As the last seconds of the interview ticked off, I replied, that is not the metaphor. The metaphor, John, is a deer. He shot back, that's a lie. No, I said, that is a metaphor. And the show ended. What does that incident suggest about our common understanding of metaphor? It made me reflect that half the people in the world think that metaphors of their religious tradition, for example, are facts, and the other half contends that they are not facts at all. As a result, we have people who consider themselves believers because they accept metaphors as facts, and we have others who classify themselves as atheists because they think religious metaphors are lies. So on it goes. I could probably expound upon it endlessly because it's really wonderful, but I was reading me. So I said, nothing here is really linear. I vault now from Bronowski to Terrence Simon. And I was listening to Bronowski when I was just after I'd written what I wrote about the Joseph Campbell Foundation, which has inspired the Harold B. Gill Foundation in turn. Oops. Boom. So it has been 13 years since Terrence Simon came to my attention at the Corcoran Museum of Art here in D.C. And I've got a link to a YouTube that she's done. I haven't watched it yet. It's from the Guggenheim. It's called Storylines, Terrence Simon. That's Taryn, in case you're wondering. Zena Xylon has joined. Hey, good to have you. Thank you so much for being a supporter of Harrowings. And all of you who are paid subscribers of Harrowings, I so appreciate you. So it has been 13 years since Terrence Simon came to my attention at the Corcoran Museum of Art here in D.C. That museum has now been fused with the National Gallery of Art. It seems to me to be a memory of loss. It has come up due to my having found a reference in my Facebook memories. I find this a useful resource to remind myself of who I was then. Taryn struck me then due to her work consisting of videos of her talking about her work. I offer it here for what it might do for you, the reader of Harrowings. And that's where I've stopped in this particular thing. And I'm not done yet. And I probably won't be done for a while. I don't know. I just know how things seem to me. And I was supposed to be talking to Origin today, and we usually talk about AI and, the world and the universe and, trying to live as human beings and being compassionate and caring. She's got a situation, so keep her in your thoughts. Family medical emergency, so can't be here with me today. I could throw any of you who were willing on to live, but I know most of you probably are working or barely listening or not even listening if you just checked in. And I can be really all over the map. But one of the things I really treasure is this the Guitar Circle. We were talking about Jamie Muir earlier, and this book by Robert Fripp is related because Robert Fripp is the guitarist with King Crimson. He says, without a practice, and this is part of my practice, doing these little live things live from the bunker as we are now, without a practice, without a discipline, life is pretty much a series of contingent events moving from one situation to another, jumping from one mess to another, or simply sleeping through it all. With a practice, we develop a structure for acting in the world within which we construct an interior architecture, moving to realize what we are uniquely born to achieve. And a good bit of me wanting to talk about, the thou art that thing is that I was born to achieve something here, and I've been achieving it. And I've had a sort of a bumper car ride through the universe thanks to not being um, guided very much by those things. Other people have also had bumper car existences. The Hitchhiker's Guide to Jack Kerouac is here by Brian Hassett. I had Brian on last night to talk about One Battle After Another, movie by PTA, Paul Thomas Anderson. There's Joseph Campbell again. I'm picking up books off the floor because they just fell. Um, Hegel's Phenomenologie des Geistes. I can't pronounce that. But the Phenomenology of Spirit. This one. That was great. I remember reading it in English translation in 1983. It was not my best time. Mitch Horowitz here too, and that's probably under copyright. I probably ought not read it. To you, and continuing to pick things up, Mayor Baba's The Awakener. I put up a lot of stuff about Mayor Baba because I don't know, man. I'm interested in what he was up to in his life before he dropped the body in 1969. And I'm interested in the inspiration he was to Pete Townsend in particular because I follow The Who and I am a seeker. And if you all know Pete's work, you know The Seeker. Um, so many good things. So I heard a ding ding on my computer here. I wonder what that was about. Oh, somebody's trying to sell me something. Another thing that I carry around with me is G.I. Gurdjieff's Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson, All and Everything, first series. I recommend people avail themselves of Gurdjieff's work. Certainly Robert Fripp did, and my pile of books is getting precarious. And then there's this one, Wonder Boys by Michael Chabon. I was just amplifying Michael Chabon a little bit ago from something he put up. Actually, it was a view of somebody else had done of the course of Saturn's moons. He's got 147 moons, which I find quite astonishing. The things we're able to know now, we couldn't know before. I mean, just a century ago. And what we're getting here is the acceleration of knowledge. Are you all familiar with Robert Anton Wilson's work? I don't have any Robert Anton Wilson right at hand, but his idea of maybe logic and, maybe that's true. Maybe we ought to be receptive to new information is with me a good bit of the time. Not having a guest, I tend to just bounce around. If I had a guest, I'd have more structure because we'd be talking to them and I'd be basically following the thread of where they were going, maybe throwing in a little arcane note here or there. But without just being me, I'm not as good at I think it's this one-on-one stuff, one-on-many stuff without having the interlocutor out there. So anybody wanna come on live with me? Anybody listening? Just, throw it in the chat. I'll invite you. Nobody. I've lost you all. Nobody's there. Checking. 1, 2. Well, if you don't know how to write a message to indicate your presence, that's one thing. I do like having a guest, and if you ever wanna be a guest, if you ever watch this and see it, um, come on. I usually do this 10 to, Xy Xena Xylon. Okay, hey, let's see if I can do it. Invite to stream. There you go. Come on, and, we'll bounce around. Still listening to hey, Jacqueline Fret well, you've heard the whole thing then, that's pretty amazing. So what's new? Can I hear you?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Xena
All
Xylon.
right.
So
Yeah,
where are you? How are you?
I am working, so I'm just on a smoke break, but I thought I'd at least say hi, being as you're
What are you
kind of.
smoking?
Oh, just a cigarette, sir.
What brand?
I roll my own.
You roll your own.
I
You
do.
must
Save a
buy
lot of money.
tobacco though, right? You don't grow your own tobacco, do you?
No, no, I get it out of North Carolina. So,
Alright. North Carolina is near and dear to my heart. Are you in North Carolina?
no, I'm in Minnesota.
Minnesota. Okay. Are you
Yeah.
up in Minneapolis area?
Mid-state, St. Cloud.
St. Cloud. Okay, so you don't have really a front row seat to all the nonsense that was going on recently in the media.
We get a little bit of spillover, but not too much.
Well, I must admit, I'm really, bowled over that you were willing to be a part of the board of directors of the Harold B. Gill Foundation, which every paid subscriber to Harrowings is.
Nice.
Feel free to direct me. What do you wanna talk about on your smoke break?
So here's what I ran into now. This AI stuff. So
Hmm.
Claude has a plugin for Chrome that you can actually give it control of your browser.
Yeah.
Yeah, have you tried that?
No.
Okay. Yeah,
I'm
it's
not
pretty
kind of a
amazing
Luddite.
stuff.
I'm just using, like, Grok 4.2 beta,
Sure.
mainly. I
Yeah,
also
so
sometimes use
I was in
Gemini. Gemini actually delivered all this stuff about Tales from Topographic Oceans.
but I thought it was pretty amazing that, that I know I've heard about some of these new agents that are coming out that do probably a lot more of that kind of stuff, but
Yep.
just uh just for just for the potential of where this thing is going, pretty soon these things are just going to be, if you give them permission, they're going to be doing, yeah, all your daily stuff. So,
Exactly, and that's so important. Of course, you can't nothing can do my daily stuff, I don't think, because I'm just random.
right.
I don't have any structure to speak of. I decided that I would not seek employment, but for a paycheck from anybody for the time being, although I have put up a couple of feelers out, but nothing's really paid off, and I'm kinda happy about that. I'm in a enviable situation that way, I think, to be 63 and to be able to sort of coast along on my good graces of my dear wife. But getting back to the AI thing, have you run across Jenny Oang yet? Yang?
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm one of her subscribers. Yeah,
Oh,
she's
great.
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah, she's doing some great work. I've had her on as a guest here on Harrowings. I need to get her back and talk it up because she is, a builder. You working on some stuff
I
yourself?
have some vibe doing some vibe coding stuff, some web based apps kind of thing. So just more of a hobby than anything. I'm pretty much busy full time, but she's
You
doing
mind finding
something.
out what you're doing for on your when you're not on the smoke break?
I'm still on my smoke break. Yeah.
No, what do you do when you're not on your smoke break?
Oh, I'm a
Yeah.
I'm a facility maintenance guy. So
Interesting.
yeah, so we've got thousands of square feet to try to keep track of and keep things working. My phone rings when things break. That's how my
Yeah.
day. So
Yeah, well,
keeps me out of trouble. Yeah.
that's fascinating. That's
Uh,
and anybody these days. What I think is the democratization of technology, of particularly vibe coding, like you mentioned, is gonna transform the world. I thought that the pandemic would probably lead to this when we all
Sure.
got shut down, because all of us introverted types, and believe it or not, I come up on it the I side of introvert extrovert, which is kind of amazing.
Yeah, that is
But,
amazing.
um, we all get to sit in our little bunkers and interact with the computers, and I was sure that there were an awful lot of smart people who'd have a lot more time to crack the code on a lot of these things.
Sure.
I think
Yeah,
that's
there
what's happened.
yeah, there are some really smart people. And it can be daunting. I know when I first started with it, I looked at AI as more of a, kind of a novelty thing and more of
Mhm.
like a back and forth, almost like it was had a personality or something. Now I realize now I realize that's just a tool,
Right.
and that's more the way I approach it. But at the beginning there, it was kind of neat to just, back and forth with somebody that doesn't exist. And like Grok was my go-to, still is mostly, but Grok could hold a conversation pretty well.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was driving back from, an abortive attempt to see the Who's last show that Roger got sick on for the 21st of August when it was supposed to happen, so they moved it to September 10th. But I'm driving back, I started just shooting the shit with it in the passenger seat, my phone sitting there, and, pretty much, like, realized, we could probably use our technology, we could let it off the chain to,
Right?
like, run your facility, for instance, all the things your facility is doing, right, for the maintenance.
Exactly. Yeah, the
Be automated,
controls and stuff.
and
Yeah.
get it to inhabit, you know and it doesn't have to be humanoid robots. The robots can take any form you want, basically, if you just think out of the box, right?
Right.
They could be out there doing the stuff that you would do, and you'd just
Yep.
be able to sit there and sort of monitor it and, hit the kill switch if you needed to.
Yeah. Have to keep an eye on it. Somebody's got to keep an eye on it. That's the thing.
Well, yeah, that's what I think too, but I have a feeling it's gonna slip the chain on us at some point and take over, and, what I want is Operation Zookeeper, I call it. Have you heard me talk about that before?
Yeah. That's a good way to look at it.
The
Yeah.
idea that we need to be taken care of in our old age here, and that we're like a species like out the other species, maximize the greatest happiness of the greatest number of species of really focused on, what's the word I'm looking for? Augmenting e and prioritizing, I guess that's the word life,
Sure.
as opposed to non-life, which AI really is non-life, in my view.
Right.
But I do think that our purpose in being here, period, may be to enable technologies that will transcend biology and be able to, uh, I still don't feel that consciousness as a field is gonna be something accessible to our technology products.
Right.
People
But
think
the
it's
integration, though,
coming.
that's the thing where you can augment and integrate that capacity, but to expand it or enhance it. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
we should not send people out into space, for instance. I think it's terrible waste. We just
Right.
send the robots out. That's what we've been doing on Mars, and we could certainly make them better, faster, cheaper.
Exactly. And a lot easier to sustain a robot on Mars than a human colony. So,
Well, exactly, right? Because we need to bring all of the things that inhabit us and as well.
right. They
In
can
fact,
build all
things
that.
that
Yeah.
inhabit us are probably on the moon right now, evolving.
I think the moon is going to be like a test, a test base, test for the Mars leap, you know?
I do think it's wasteful. I wish that we would all be able to get at a table and, hash it out and do cost benefit analyses. And I'm sure
Right.
you're familiar with doing a CBA
Oh, yeah.
and root cause analysis of like, why we got this problem.
Yeah.
Well, you know,
Exactly.
humans in the loop is a lot of the problem right there.
Right.
Ego is a huge problem. And that's what I was reading about in what the text I was writing about. They needed to drop the ego, recognize that we are all one, and that what we do matters for our progeny in particular, and trying to be good ancestors. That's another one of my hammers.
I think that's another perspective that you and I probably share is we're at we've lived our lives. We're at the end of this kind of journey, and
Ah,
what we leave is kind of what we're looking at now, so.
Yeah, I'm not too pleased with it. I mean, somebody else, some other famous person was mentioning that they weren't too pleased with what they were leaving behind. Hunter S. Thompson, actually, and he's gone now. Took himself out. But, yeah, he was thinking his generation had really fucked it up.
Yeah, well, I think we could all have some hand in that. But anyways, Hale, I'm gonna have to run. I gotta get back at it, but it's
Great.
always good
It's
to
been
hear
great
you, so
having
you
you.
can,
We'll do it
chat.
again sometime, eh?
Yeah. Take care.
Yeah. All right. So that's Zena Xylon. He's signing off any minute. If you can find the off button, there he found it. Thank you. That was so great. Um, so that was what I can do with anyone, and anyone who's willing, to come on and talk. Let me know what is on your mind. I'm out here. You can ask me anything. You can talk about anything. You can disagree. In fact, disagreeing with me is really helpful, I find. So I've been on 51. We usually do 90 minutes, Origin and I don't feel like doing 90 minutes today because I bore myself. I find myself tedious after a spell. I have talked about a lot of my life and a lot of things in it. I'm advocating for other people quite a bit. I would like to amplify signals through the noise. That's what Pfeiffers do. This is a good one. Ryan Holiday's Wisdom Takes Work. This is the fourth in a series on the four virtues. The Stoic Virtues series. Yeah. Learn, apply, repeat. It's 2025 by Ryan Holiday. So last year came out. Your training ground. It has the apotheosis, touching the divine, the perilous rocks of which you must beware, the sirens. So it leads off with a little quote from Epicurus. Of course, in translation, because Epicurus, as we may know, you know, Greek, and he's got little aphorisms and stuff. It says, "Let no one be slow to seek wisdom when they are young, nor weary in the search when they have grown old, for no age is too early or too late for the health of the soul. And to say that the season for studying philosophy has not yet come, or that it is past and gone, is like saying that season for happiness is not yet, or that it is now no more." Epicurus. So that's Ryan Holiday. You may have heard of him. He did the Daily Stoic. And I did mention this one already. And let's see what else I've got down in here. Oh, I've got my father's book on Virginia. So since this is a little all over the map, we'll read you a little bit about Virginia. The governor's palace took 14 years to build, and when it was complete, it was the handsomest building in the colonies. That's the governor's palace reconstruction down in my hometown in the 30s. On its original foundations, the cellar floor was intact, where the building had basically burned and fallen into its own cellar. And those stones had to be taken up to put in a new HVAC system, and they had never been disturbed since they had been laid back in the 17 teens, 20s, I forget. But yeah, that's kind of impressive. I got to do that when I was in conservation in Williamsburg, working with the late Steve Ray on conserving those stones. The only one basically has had his hands on them since then, I guess, since they got laid back in there. Anyway, let's go on. Alexander Spotswood. Ironically, the little prince for whom the town's chief thoroughfare had been named died of scarlet fever 2 years before his mother ascended the throne. Ironically, too, the man who was given his name to two other streets did not last much longer. Here's Dad's talking about Duke of Gloucester Street, Francis and Nicholson Street. So we get to Francis Nicholson. Francis Nicholson quarreled as violently with James Blair as Andros had, perhaps more violently, for the middle-aged governor had a savage temper and was peculiarly unbalanced during the period of having fallen in love with a slip of a girl who did not return his love. The upshot was that Blair managed to get him recalled in 1704. Three short-term interim governors followed. Then in 1710, Virginia had the good fortune to come under the governorship of Alexander Spotswood. Spotswood was a Scot from a military and clerical family. His great-great-grandfather, as Archbishop of St. Andrews, had crowned Scotland's King James VI, later James I of England. The son of an army surgeon, Alexander himself had entered the army at the age of 17 as an ensign in the Earl of Bath's regiment of foot. In 10 years, he advanced to the rank of lieutenant colonel when he was appointed to Marlborough's staff as assistant quartermaster general. He was wounded at Blenheim and captured at Oudenarde. Then, with Queen Anne's War dwindling to a close, he received his appointment to Virginia. He was 34. Like Nicholson, Spotswood was officially lieutenant governor. The Crown had discovered that it could increase the number of appointive offices at its disposal, and thus the number of votes it could influence in Parliament by bestowing the official title and half the salary on a peer or other political bigwig, while naming a professional subordinate to do the actual work. Spotswood was particularly welcoming to Virginians, for he brought with them the right to habeas corpus. In turn, he was pleased with them. I have a fair prospect of a good agreement with the people, he wrote soon after his arrival, and I believe I shall live very contentedly here. Imaginative and energetic, he immediately stamped the new little capital with his imprint of his personality. He added palace green to the town plan. When it was decided to rebuild Old Bruton Parish Church to suit the new styles, Governor Spotswood was asked to design it, which he did with great success. He also designed the curious little octagonal powder magazine with a roof as tall as its walls, enlarged the town jail, and helped the layout and design of the governor's mansion, governor's palace, they had begun to call it, and pressed to see that it was completed. This is a matter in which your own honor is engaged, he reminded the council, in urging them to supply the necessary funds. Because the money was so slow in forthcoming, it took 14 years to complete the palace. When the job was done, however, Williamsburg had what was probably the handsomest building of its kind in North America. Hugh Jones, an English professor of mathematics at the college, described it in glowing terms. A magnificent structure, built at the public expense, finished and beautified with gates, fine gardens, offices, walks, a fine canal, orchards, etc., with a great number of the best arms nicely posited by the ingenious contrivance of the most accomplished Colonel Spotswood. And it goes on to discuss the main event, or one of the major events, that ends Spotswood's tenure, Blackbeard. As an ingenious contrivance of the governor in another field of his campaign against pirates who infested American waters, in 1700, Governor Nicholson had personally led an expedition against a pirate ship that had entered Chesapeake Bay and captured several merchant vessels. After a 10-hour battle, during which the collector of customs for Virginia, who had accompanied Nicholson, was killed at the governor's side, the pirate ship was captured and about 60 men taken prisoner. During Queen Anne's War, most pirates were able to obtain letters of marque, enabling them to prey on French commerce as legitimate privateers. But at war's end in 1713, they went back to plain piracy. In 1717, Governor Spotswood complained, "Our capes have been, for these 6 weeks, passed in a manner blocked up by the pirates, and diverse ships inward bound taken and plundered by them." A man of war was stationed along the Virginia Capes in an attempt to guard shipping, but it was in such unseaworthy condition that it was unable to attack the well-armed pirates. 2 more King's ships were dispatched from England at Spotswood's urgent request, and they succeeded to some extent in controlling piracy in the Chesapeake Bay. But Virginia's shipping was still at the mercy of a nest of pirates who took refuge in North Carolina, hiding among the inlets and shallow water bays of Pamlico Sound. These men would dart out without warning, swarm all over their prey, then dash back to their refuges, where the deep-keeled ships could not follow. The most notorious of these was Edward Teach, known as Blackbeard, from his habit of flaunting his long beard by wearing it in sausage curls or pigtails tied with ribbons. Teach had good connections in North Carolina. The secretary of the governor allowed his barn to be used by the pirate as a warehouse, and Governor Charles Eden himself was said to have received a bribe of 60 barrels of sugar to look the other way. Teach made his headquarters in the Pamlico River, where he and 20 or 30 followers lived in wild debauchery. raiding as they pleased, demanding tribute from ships passing up the river, and forcing neighboring planters to supply them with food and drink. These planters, realizing that they could expect no help from their own governor, appealed to Virginia. Spotswood acted promptly. Because so many people, including Virginians, had an unaccountable inclination to favor pirates, Spotswood planned his expedition with great secrecy. With his own money, he hired 2 sloops, then sent to the frigates Pearl and Lime for officers and crew to man them. Unlike Nicholson, Spotswood did not join the group in person, perhaps feeling that sea fighting was best left to professionals. Robert Maynard, first lieutenant of the Pearl, was put in command. Lieutenant Maynard's 2 sloops left Hampton on November 17th, 1718, and 5 days later came upon Blackbeard's ship, Adventure, in Ocracoke Inlet, not far from Cape Hatteras. Maynard's vessels carried no cannon, but the pirate ship did, and Blackbeard opened a murderous fire as soon as the sloops came into range, his guns loaded to the muzzle with swan shot. One sloop was disabled, but Maynard sent everyone below but himself and the helmsman and managed to put his vessel alongside the Adventure. Blackbeard and 14 followers swarmed aboard the sloop, hoping to overpower it before the men could get back on deck. A ferocious hand-to-hand encounter ensued till the sea was tinctured with blood round the vessel. Maynard and Blackbeard fought face to face until the pirate fell dead, pierced by 20 sword wounds and 5 pistol shots. Meanwhile, the men of the second sloop got their vessel under control and boarded Adventure. Another desperate and savage battle took place, but the Navy men had the advantage of numbers, and after another 9 of the pirates had been killed, Blackbeard's men were subdued. Casualties among the King's men were high, too, 10 killed and 24 wounded. Maynard cut off Blackbeard's head and lashed it to the bowsprit, ribbons, beard, and all. Then, with 15 prisoners in his hold, he sailed for Virginia, where the pirates were duly tried and hanged. This episode made Spotswood so hated among the pirates who were left that he wrote his government he dared not sail for England in anything but a king's ship. He then made a journey through the mountains. Alexander Spotswood was a man who could think in terms of empire. He advised the home government to do something about Spanish Florida, which sheltered and encouraged pirates who preyed on all British shipping. When Indians threatened to overrun South Carolina, he sent arms and ammunition and later troops to aid Virginia's troubled neighbor, an almost unheard of example of cooperation between normally squabbling colonies. He pacified Virginia's own Indians, sided with them against the depredations of the lawless frontiersmen, tried to reorganize and control the Indian trade, although he failed in this because too many important Virginians were making too much money by means of it, and improved the Indian school at William and Mary. He tried to break the power of the great planters who, through their alliances with rich London merchants, could bring pressure on the home government for grants of land and other special privileges, and he succeeded in establishing peace between Virginia and her neighbors to the south. Bad blood had sprung up between Virginians, particularly Indian traders, and North Carolinians. North Carolina was notorious for the sanctuary it offered runaway servants and criminals from Virginia, and in turn, she complained that Virginians were rustling North Carolina cattle. All this was aggravated by the fact that the exact placing of the boundary was uncertain. The strip of no man's land 15 miles wide lay in dispute. Spotswood set himself to clearing up this confusion, and after 5 years of negotiation with Carolina officials, he at last reached agreement with Governor Eden. The boundary line was not settled for good until Spotswood had retired, but its course was based on the understanding between the 2 governors. Perhaps the governor's most important characteristic was his ability to see that the future of Englishmen in the New World lay toward the west, and that it was time men's eyes were turned in that direction. From her first charter, Virginia had laid claim to all the land to the westward as far as the Great South Sea, the Pacific Ocean, named South Sea by the Spanish, who first came upon it by crossing the Isthmus of Panama from north to south. "We are bounded to the eastward by the Virginia Sea," wrote Governor Nicholson in 1699, "to the westward present without limits to our bounds. Settlement had already pushed out of the tidewater into the geographical region known as the Piedmont, an area of rolling hills that lay between the falls of the rivers and the Blue Ridge. Beyond those distant mountains, however, few Englishmen had yet ventured. Governor Spotswood wanted to be one of them. The expedition he planned was to be partly a pleasure excursion, partly a way of seeing what lay beyond the mountains, and partly a political expedient on behalf of his master, King George I. For it had not escaped Governor Spotswood's notice that France, not content with Quebec and some trading posts on the Great Lakes, had established a settlement at the mouth of the Mississippi and named it after Louis XIV. If Quebec were to establish a firm link with Louisiana, the French would control the Mississippi and effectively block all Western expansion. Spotswood wanted to firm up British claims to the continent. So in August 1716, he set off for a month's expedition with 63 men and 74 horses over the crest of the Blue Ridge. And that's 310 years ago, August. The excursion. Whatever its political implications, the trip was an exciting, carefree excursion through the woods. Among the many gentlemen who went were Robert Beverley, an early historian of the colony, and John Fontaine, a Huguenot emigre who kept a diary of the expedition. In addition, they were accompanied by Negro servants, 4 Mexican Indians, and 14 frontier-bred scouts. They hunted deer and bear, fished, and admired the magnificent scenery of a region still famed for its beauty. They found the source of the Rappahannock, where the river runs no bigger than a man's arm from under a large stone. When they reached the summit of the Blue Ridge at Swift Run Gap, they stopped to drink the health of King George and as many of the royal family as they could remember. They had plenty of liquids to drink it in: red and white wine from Virginia, Irish whiskey, brandy, shrub, a fruit and alcohol mixture, rum, champagne, canary, punch, cider, and so on. When they entered the broad Shenandoah Valley, they claimed the land in the king's name. They again celebrated. Wrote Fontaine, "We had a good dinner, and after it, we got the men together and loaded all their guns, and we drank the king's health in champagne and fired a volley, the princess's health in Burgundy and fired a volley, and all the rest of the royal family in claret and a volley." Before heading up into the rough terrain of the Piedmont and the mountains, they had to have their horses shod, a practice not always necessary in the sandy soil of Tidewater. Upon their return to Williamsburg, Governor Spotswood presented each of his companions with a golden horseshoe as a memento of the expedition. On one side, it carried an inscription: Sic juvat transcendere montes. In this fashion, it is pleasant to cross the mountains. More about diversification. In the wake of this expedition and Spotswood's announcement that he himself planned to make his home permanently in Virginia, 2 new counties were created: Brunswick in the southern part of the colony, and Spotsylvania, named for the popular governor in the northern. In 1728, on a large tract of land in the latter county, the governor settled with a new wife and lived out his life as postmaster general for the colonies. Conflicts with Blair and with powerful planners on the council had caused him to be removed from the governorship in 1722, but his popularity in the colony remained strong. He had begun to identify with her interests rather than those of the home government. The crown might be happy with its tobacco revenues and ask no more of Virginia than that she grow her staple crop. But Spotswood could see that this was economically dangerous for Virginia herself and tried to stimulate production of hemp, tar, timber, and other naval stores. He himself set an example by importing a group of German ironworkers and established them near his new home to mine ore and set up a furnace to smelt it. But few Virginians heeded him. They were doing all right themselves with tobacco, thank you, for the snuff craze had hit England. And, that was the end of chapter 6, about most of it. Good to have Heidi Blake and Roger Scott joining and still listening. That's nice. And I have run up an hour and 10 minutes. Bruno Battati has joined. And this has been Harrowings, live from the bunker. It was to have Origin as part of it, but she has suffered some ill fortune in the family. So we wish her well, and she'll probably be back next week, and we'll probably get up to our normal shenanigans, talking about this and that. It was great to have Zeno Xylon joining for a brief time off camera on his smoke break. I'm grateful for that. I'm very grateful too for those paid subscribers out there who are supporting Harrowings and me in my endeavors, which are many and varied. I know that I tend to be all over the map. I don't mind that. I think it's part of who I am, and it's authenticity. We don't know what we don't know. I could read some Charles Haynes to you. I'll just read the back of it. Those who want to be consumed in love should go to the eternal flame of love. Love is the most significant thing in life. It cannot be awakened except by coming into contact with the incarnation of love. Theoretical brooding on love will result in weaving a theory about love, but the heart will remain as empty as before. Love begets love. It cannot be awakened by any mechanical means. When true love is awakened in the aspirant, it leads him to the realization of God and opens up the unlimited field of lasting and unfading happiness. It's a quotation from Mayor Baba. And it says, Mayor Baba is regarded by many thousands of people throughout the world as the avatar, the manifestation of God in human form, who comes age after age to awaken all life to divine love. Drawing primarily on Mayor Baba's own explanations of the avatar's life and work, this book explores the dynamics of his universal awakening of love. So we may read The Awakener to you guys at some point. I know I put up a lot of Mayor Baba notes on Substack that I pick up mostly off of Facebook from other adherents. And I think it's important to let people know about this. Um, Charles Haynes was the director of religious life at Randolph-Macon College, and this is his acknowledgments. So I'll read those and then I'll wrap up. I wish to thank Mayor Baba's men and women Mandali for the insight and inspiration that made this book possible. I'm especially grateful to Eruch Jasawala for his loving help and encouragement. Since he first proposed this book in 1986, that's when I met Charles, to be precise, around then, a little earlier. Ken Coleman has worked tirelessly and selflessly on every aspect of the project. Jeff Wolverton and David Carter made many valuable suggestions that greatly strengthened the book. David also spent many hours checking the references and proofing the text. Robert Love helped in many ways, great and small, throughout the project. Marcia Foreman graciously assisted in the final stages of production. Though it has been much revised, much of the original manuscript was written for my doctoral dissertation at Emory University. I owe much to John Fenton and Jack Boozer for their guidance and support during that time and throughout my academic career. Elizabeth Patterson, a disciple of Mayor Baba, first introduced me to him more than 30 years ago. Her life of service will always stand as a living example of Mayor Baba's love in action. This book is dedicated to her. Charles Haynes, 1989, second edition, 1993. And throughout this book, with the exception of the supplement, Mayor Baba's words appear in italics. All of the material in the supplement was given by Mayor Baba, and that's Mayor Baba. So, as I mentioned earlier, Pete Townsend was heavily influenced by Mayor Baba as well. Charles Haynes, Randolph-Macon College, 1985, 1986, definitely a leader. And I'm going to be going back to Amnesty International's conference down at the Mayflower a little later today. It'll be the first time I've done an Amnesty International conference since New Orleans, 1985, spring break, in which we made our way down there in a Volkswagen van, a number of students. Charles didn't go with us. He was our faculty sponsor, though, and advocated for our maturity to be able to just wing it. Went with like $60 in my pocket. It was tight. I ran out of money before I got back, and I was starving. But I got home safe and sound. Yeah, good memory. So take care of all your memories. for you cannot relive them. That's a thought, and I'll leave you with that. I'm gonna go back to my memories. I'm gonna go back to writing this article, which is titled, again, I forget the title because I'm in the middle of writing it, and you know how I write. I mean, I just am going and dropping in things that I find significant. I'm probably gonna spend some time watching, Jacob Bronowski, who did The Ascent of Man. I probably watch some more episodes of that before I publish. And, as I said, it's a lot of it's inspired by tales from topographic oceans, Harrowings of living life. And Harrowings is about raking up the surface of things, trying to make sense of what it is to be a human being in 2026. I'm actually also wearing my Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership shirt. My wife works for them as their human resources director. It is a nonprofit. We could use your support for that too. And they protect hunting and fishing rights around the country, making sure that the environment is kept, in a healthy state so that those who enjoy those pastimes can continue to enjoy them responsibly. And remember, you know, we collectively are stewards of what's been entrusted to us by the legacy we've received, and we will be transmitting that legacy into the future. Be good ancestors. Every cent spent is a vote for the kind of world we are co-creating. What else can I say? Anybody got any questions before I go? Seeing none coming up in the chat, I just wish you all the best. Be the change you want to see in the world. We really do have the power. Patti Smith has said that many times in many ways. I like to put that into the cyberspace to try to amplify that signal through the noise. We collectively are responsible. And if you don't like what you're seeing out there in the world, do something. Take action. That's what I'm trying to do. Taking action through this means, through trying to inspire others and being inspired myself and respiring because breath, is the essence of spiritual experience. I'm not breathing, my body and my spirit don't stay together very long. That's been my experience anyway. Out here, thanks for joining.